Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and as you know now, because we're in our 25th season at the Writer's Block, I interview writers and sometimes other brands of artists about their work. I ask them what they're working on now, what they've accomplished in the past, what their future plans might be. We've had on poets and novelists, short story writers, journalists, all kinds of writers, and when we're lucky, we get other brands of artists as well. People who work in the visual arts, compose, act, play instruments, all kinds of artists. It's a pretty wide net. So if you have an idea for a guest who might be good for the Writer's Block, please watch for our address at the end of the program. We'd love to get your suggestions. I also want to remind you that this original programming from KPAN TV is the result of cable access television. You don't get that with Dish, so don't switch and don't be tempted to switch. Stick with cable access television. Tonight, I'm very happy to say that we do have an artist, someone who works in print and sometimes other visual forms. Her name is Coco Berkman. She is a Gloucester resident, although she was born and raised in Brookline down the road. She has studied at Montserrat, Mass Art, and she has studied printmaking in Dublin, Ireland. She has had many shows. You've probably seen some of her work here at Sawyer Free Library or perhaps the Newton Library. And as many working artists do, she shows at local stores and banks and is a favorite of the 13 Forest Gallery in Newton, I think you said.
It's in Arlington.
Arlington, excuse me, in Arlington. She has won a residency at the Turkey Land Cove Foundation at Martha's Vineyard, and she's been a frequent visitor to Frogman's Press at the University of South Dakota. She is presently working on a series of prints based on James Joyce's famous novel, Ulysses, and some of the work that's ongoing is already up in the Dublin Writers' Museum, which is right along the Liffey, because I've been there. Coco Berkman, welcome to the show.
John, thank you so much for having me, for inviting me to come on your show. I love your show.
Now, as I mentioned before we went on, I was going to ask you some general questions. Mm-hmm. Where and when did you get interested in art? When you were a little tyke, or was that as an adult?
Yeah, definitely. It was always there. It was always. I think most people, was born with a great desire to create something, and I made a lot of wrong turns along the way. I went to school of fashion design. I studied costume design. I've taken lots of classes over many years, and
in different disciplines.
And I came to printmaking very indirectly. I mean, it's really funny that I love that you invited me on the Writer's Block because, wow, what an honor for me, because my work is so connected to writing. It's amazing. I make visual images because writing, I can't write. But
the press is the same.
What?
The press is the same.
The process is so similar. And I've written a lot when I was younger. I always thought I'd be a writer, but the pieces just never came together for me that way. But I rely so much on writing for my process. I mean, other visual artists listen to music. I listen to audiobooks every day.
Audiobooks, yeah?
Every day.
And you're working on something about Joyce now in the process.
I am. And
so the writing feeds, I'm always interested in double artistic motivations. Writing feeds your creativity while you're actually working.
Absolutely. And in fact, it's kind of embarrassing because I don't have attention to sit and read a book. It's refreshing when I have time to actually read a book with my eyes, but I really rely on audiobooks. It's a way for me to get the stories and the writing.
It's not distracting.
Oh God, no. I mean, it's sometimes if it's bad writing, it's like background noise, but it's people. It's people having conversations. I'm addicted to it. I love it.
What?
I love listening to the story.
Name a couple books that you've listened to lately.
Lately, well, The Goldfinch. Don't ask me to criticize any books, but The Goldfinch
That's about
by
the painting.
John Tart, which is really good. I have to admit that my favorite books are really junky, really like true murder, mystery, crime.
Crime fiction?
Love that stuff.
We've had a couple of crime authors on
Love it.
the show this year.
Really? I don't know. It's just like something that's not too heavy. Although, you know, I like to listen to. I'm gonna be so angry later because there's so many great books that I listen to constantly, and they elude me right now. But
so when you're listening, you create your prints, and you have brought some of your work down here.
I have, yeah.
Can you tell us about some of the work that you've brought?
Yeah.
Starting with
this.
We have conspicuously put one of your prints right in front of us.
Yeah.
You describe that.
This has special meaning to me. It's called Crow Fable. I made it. Crow Fable.
Crow Fable.
Yeah.
2 words? Or is
That's right.
1 word?
It's 2 words. I made it several years ago, and I made it inspired by one of your poems.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, The Crows of Paradise Road.
Oh, yeah.
So I just like to acknowledge.
That's a big surprise.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know.
Wow. John, you're an old friend of mine, and I remember once I had this brilliant idea to apply for a grant to kind of put your poetry alongside my imagery. It was an idea that I felt very strong about at the time. I didn't get the grant. But
I remember.
Yeah, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And it was such a wonderful experience for me. I had a show at the Sawyer Free Library, put your poems there, and it was the exercise of kind of like being inspired by your poetry, forced me to read your poetry, first of all.
Good.
I
don't have any audiobooks.
I loved it. Yeah. Well.
Crows Along Paradise Road.
Yes.
And tell us, if you can, something about the colors and the shapes that you use here, and how that was related to the.
Oh, don't ask me that, John. Because it's really. Well, you know, poetry's a funny thing. You know, I like to say that I like to be inspired by writers, not to illustrate their work. So it's kind of like I love kind of like stream of consciousness. I don't like to think about what I'm drawing. I just like to draw. I like to draw. I'm not a classically trained artist, although I've taken certainly lots of classical art making classes, but that kind of like realism really bores me. It's just me. But
so something like this that is not a it's not a translation. It's not an illustration. It's something that was simply an echo of your
inspired
reaction.
Inspired by.
See, okay.
And so that was I was so proud of that show. It was love to see your poetry on the wall and my imagery, and a lot of people came up to me afterwards and said, you know, I've never liked poetry, or it really, the imagery pulled them in. So it's like, what is this? What is this? And
Yeah, people
Yeah,
do
the
respond
process.
to different forms and different art forms, and it's good to see one through another, or
Right.
be led to one through another.
Right. And people love to, you know, well, a little bit of color, a little bit of imagery.
You surprised me with that. Yeah,
Sorry about that, John.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good. I like that
recognized
poem. It's a pretty good poem. You brought some other things.
I did.
Can we talk about a couple other of your
Sure.
pieces that you brought down?
Yes, I'd love to. And also I want to say that I've studied different forms of printmaking. There's many forms of printmaking. I love linoleum printmaking. It's something I remember doing in kindergarten. So I have a natural affinity for it. I feel like a little kid whenever I'm working with it. It's so much fun. And I love to show kids of all ages how to do it.
Tell me how you make a linoleum print.
Well,
What's the,
I brought a little piece of linoleum,
oh, good.
and I use Japanese tools, and I carve into it. And then it's out of all the, I believe, out of all the art making, visual art making forms, printmaking is like, it's the messiest, it's the most process demanding, and
So it's
I
fun.
love it.
It's fun because it's messy.
It's messy. You spend just as much time cleaning up afterwards as printing.
So when you have a piece of linoleum, you cut away what you do not want
Right.
to be printed. So
Exactly.
so you make a positive,
Right.
essentially, and then you roll
The ink
the
on.
ink over it.
Right. However, with printmaking, everything is backwards. So it's a real challenge for your brain, because if you start thinking, you won't get anything done.
So you're cutting out what you don't want.
Yeah, it's a very intuitive, and the process of linoleum printmaking I love most is called reductive printmaking, and rather than, and I'll show you right now
Please.
what I'm talking about. So, sorry. Because I brought some black and white work. Okay, so this is
We'll put that down in
put
front of the other print.
this is a black and white piece. It's carved out of a sheet of linoleum, and then the linoleum is rolled with black ink and put through the printing press on beautiful printmaking paper. Black and white, easy.
This is very nice, dense paper.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know how many pound gauge that would be, but it's way
Yeah.
above 60 or 100 or
There's
120.
so many, it's like a world of paper. It's so wonderful. There's so many different kinds of printmaking paper.
Was this one piece, big piece of linoleum, or several?
That's one sheet of linoleum carved in.
And
Just
what-
want to point out that this drawing, it's called The Kings Contemplate the Cosmos. This is a typical,
Say that again. The king,
the kings contemplate the cosmos.
the kings plural, contemplate
Yes.
the cosmos.
This is a typical stream of consciousness print of mine. It has no rhyme or reason. Don't ask me what it means. It grew out of a drawing that I was going to throw away because I thought it was so stupid. But now I know when I'm drawing, if I'm embarrassed by something I'm drawing, I have to go with it, because
It's a
there's
challenge.
rich rewards.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but if you're embarrassed, it means you're onto something. You know, you're onto something new, or
'Cause it's not comfortable.
Yeah.
If it's comfortable, I tell my students, if the word comes into your brain right away, throw it out. 'Cause
that's
it's too
good.
comfortable.
too comfortable. It's good to be uncomfortable. It's good to be in pain when you're making art, don't you think?
I don't know if
Excruciating
it's good.
pain.
It's inevitable. Sort of.
It is
I don't-
inevitable.
Right.
So this is my black and white work. So that's a one-shot deal. I mean, not really, but so and
This is something, I bet it has to do with
so
your Joyce work.
yeah, this is a piece from my Joyce work.
Good. Describe this.
So this is this is imagery. Oh God, it's Blazes Boylan is on his way to have a tete-a-tete with Molly Bloom, and he's picking up a basket of fruit and at the shop, and
so
there's the imagery, and there are these people with Heelys. Back in the olden days, before advertising, people used to wear sandwich boards. And so there was a drugstore called Heelys in Dublin, Helys. And the drugstore would hire 5 guys to wear sandwich boards, each with a different letter, and walk the streets of Dublin back and forth to advertise the drugstore.
This is, we're back in Ulysses, Joyce's novel.
Yep.
Which I should know what year it was published. But
it takes place at the turn of the 20th century. It's one day, 24 hours in Dublin. But actually, my project to work on pieces inspired by Ulysses was motivated to help me understand it, because I knew I loved it. I knew I loved the writing. And the writing was very important to me. It's it's a very challenging book, and
yes, I'll say.
And many people try to read it, and abandon it. But
I'm proud to say I completed it. I didn't understand absolutely every single word. I do remember one wonderful line, though. A person in there has trying to give up drinking.
Yeah.
And they ask him if it's true, and he says, I touch nothing at all between drinks. So
nothing.
There's some good lines in there. Now this is, as opposed to the earlier work we saw, this is an illustration.
Yeah, I guess, but I'm not.
So you move back and forth between.
I'm reluctant to say illustration because I guess it is, though, in a way. I mean, how dare I, though? That's part of me is like, what, you're illustrating Ulysses? What, are you mad? I mean, I want to create some images inspired by my understanding of it. It's such a deep book. I mean, it's like music. It's like jazz. The words in that book are incredible. I mean, don't even try to understand that book.
How many
as far as I'm
prints do you intend from the entire series?
I've been working on it quite a few years now. Every year I try to do at least one a year.
How many are at the Dublin Writing Museum?
5. I've completed 5, and there are 5 there.
And that is right along the Liffey. I think it's on the...
I thought it was near Marion Square. I haven't even been there since they accepted my work. I mean...
Maybe they moved.
Yeah.
Or maybe
there's a lot of writers' museums. There's a James Joyce Museum, Writers' Museum, but then there's the Dublin Writers' Museum. I might be wrong. I don't know.
I'm sure I'm wrong.
But one of these days.
We'll have to get a Gloucester trip. We'll rent a plane and fly over.
So I also wanted, so I'll just bring, I just wanted to just show, I brought 3 pieces that are Ulysses, and they're all very colorful. And what I want to say about them is that they're not black and white. There's many colors. The color ones are called reductive linoleum prints. They take me months to make. I make like an edition of like between 15 and 25 prints. I print one color at a time. I carve between each color. I wait for the ink to dry. I make color decisions as I go along. I have no idea what color is going to be the next color. And I'm working backwards. I'm laying down the lightest colors first, and the last color is always black or a dark gray.
Where does this work take place? Do you have a studio?
In my basement studio.
In your basement studio?
I have a huge...
right on
Centennial.
Centennial Avenue
right.
here in Gloucester.
In Gloucester. I call it my press. It's called Stage Fort Press.
Stage Fort
Press.
Press. Is
So-
that mentioned on your website?
It is.
And we show the
Yeah.
URL on our supers.
Yeah. So that
So all the creativity takes place right near Gloucester Harbor.
that's right.
I know just a few doors. My brother lives around there. Just a few doors from the water.
That's right. It happens.
Tell me, this is a kind of a technical, artistic question, but I always ask writers about the nuts and bolts of writing, and I like to talk to artists about that too. The print process is elaborate and it's expensive.
Mhm.
Now, you sell some of your work.
Yep.
Do you have to work to support your art, or do you simultaneously, or do you put the art away, save some money, do some work, and then go back to the art 100% of the next 2 or
That's
3 or
a-
4 months? How do you
that's a
balance
great-
the real world and
That
and
is
art?
great. It's a great question. There's so many levels. One level is the money level of being a creative person. That's huge. I'm 58 years old, and I didn't really start being seriously making my art till I was 50. And I wasn't sitting around doing nothing until then. I've always had a passion to make art, but it's hard. It's hard life. You know, you've got to. Early on, I studied animation at the museum school. That's expensive. So printmaking to me is like really cheap. Making films is really, really expensive. I bought myself a printing press. I took out a loan. It was the most important thing in the world to me. I wanted to make imagery, and I wanted to make what I wanted to make, you know, and I paid off a loan to buy a huge press that is costs a fortune every time I want to move it. I love it though.
What are its
love it.
dimensions?
It's like it has a bed of like, when I say the bed, the printing surface of 31 by 60. Like I can print a piece of paper twice this size on it.
So 5 by
Yeah.
5 by 2.5 to 3 or something like that.
Yeah.
What does a
31.
printing press cost?
Well,
If we were going to
you
buy
can
a
spend
brand
a
new
lot of
one,
money.
a brand new one,
You can spend
say
a
that
lot.
size or a little bigger, with a bed of say
Yeah.
60 by 60.
Well,
What would a brand new
a
press
brand new
cost?
one would cost between $10,000 and $20,000. Although you keep your, you know, if you're really passionate about it, and you can. For many years, I hand printed things, just simple things, but you know, rubbing with a wooden spoon or something called a baren. I mean,
Just to get some pressure on them.
just to get the pressure on. I mean, we have a rich history of linoleum printmaking in Gloucester with the Folly Co. printmakers, you know. And I remember seeing a poster that was made by the Folly Co. printmakers, and it was of like a cartoon sequence of how to make a linoleum print. And the last image was, you know, somebody stepping on the stepping on the print with putting their full body weight. But it's great having a printing press. It's not wasted on me. I use it all the time. I love it so much.
I'd like to see that
Yeah.
sometime. See, I worked with print when I was younger with newspapers.
Yeah,
So I love the process.
yeah. It's great.
I just got the 3-minute signal from Liz, our camera woman, today. So I'm going to have to begin to
right.
wrap up.
John,
I wish
thanks
we
so
had
much.
time to look at more of your prints. I know you brought some beautiful things, and maybe you can come back and visit the show again.
That
We'll
would be great.
show some more.
Thank you, John.
Coco Berkman, printmaker, Gloucester resident, and well-known regional artist. Thank you very much for coming down to the Writer's Block tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's Good to be here, John.
If you out in TV land have learned something about Coco Berkman's background and printmaking and seen something of her art here this evening on the Writer's Block, then we're happy to have done our job. We also hope to see you again next week on the Writer's Block. Good night.